All rights to the characters and storyline of Fruits Basket belong solely to its creators and copyright holders. This text is a fan-created interpretation and does not claim any ownership or official affiliation with creators or distributors of Fruits Basket. All references to the character and their development are based on the original work and are intended solely for entertainment and discussion purposes. Kyo stirred awake, the early morning light gently seeping through the curtains. His body was wrapped in a warmth that was unusual for him, and for a split second he couldn't figure out why. But then, as his gaze settled on the clock reading 6:05 and his surroundings started to come into focus, it all clicked. He was naked, and so was the girl curled up next to him, Tohru. A slow, tender smile crept onto his face. How could he not smile? Tohru was lying beside him, her body pressed against his under the covers, her chest rising and falling softly with each breath. The events of the previous night came flooding back to him, making his heart race and his skin tingle with the memory of every touch, every kiss, every whispered word between them. Kyo couldn't resist the urge to just watch her for a moment, taking in every detail. Her hair was a bit messy, strands falling all over her face on the pillow, and her makeup was slightly smudged from the heat of their passion last night. But she had never looked more beautiful to him. Unable to help himself, he gently brushed his stray lock of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her soft skin. The touch caused her to stir, and he watched as her eyes fluttered open slowly, her gaze sleepy and a little disoriented at first. "Good morning," Kyo whispered, his voice thick and raspy from sleep. Tohru blinked a few times, her sleepy confusion giving way to recognition, and then a soft, shy smile. "Hi," she whispered back, her voice just as soft. "How'd you sleep?" he asked, keeping his voice low, not wanting to break the gentle calm of the morning. Tohru gave a little nod, her smile growing as she snuggled closer to him, resting her head against his chest. Kyo's heart skipped a beat as he felt her warm breath on his skin, her body molding perfectly against his. He wrapped an arm around her, holding her close as his other hand traced lazy circles on her bare back. The room was quiet, the only sound being the soft breathing of their synchronized breaths. After a few peaceful moments, Kyo felt Tohru shift slightly, and he glanced down to find her looking up at him with those big brown eyes of hers. She was more awake now, her gaze clear and filled with something that made his chest tighten, in the best way. "What?" Kyo asked, a playful smile tugging at his lips. "What's that smile for?" Tohru blushed a little bit, ducking her head shyly before looking back at him. "I'm just happy," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Kyo felt a surge of emotion at her words. He reached up, gently cupping her cheek in his hand, his thumb brushing over her soft skin. "Yeah?" he murmured, his gaze searching hers. "Yeah," she replied, leaning into his touch, her eyes closing briefly as if she were savoring the feel of his hand on her face. Kyo felt his heart swell with affection. He pulled her even closer, their bodies pressing together, skin against skin, and it sent a shiver of electricity down his spine. He couldn't resist anymore. Leaning down, he pressed his lips to the delicate curve of her neck, trailing soft, slow kisses along her skin. He could feel her shiver underneath his touch, her breath hitching in a way that drove him wild. "Kyo," she breathed, her voice a mix of need and hesitation. "Do you like that?" he asked, his voice filled with desire as he continued to kiss her neck, his lips brushing against the sensitive spot just below her ear. Tohru nodded, her fingers curling into the sheets as she let out a soft, breathy moan that made Kyo's pulse quicken. He pulled back slightly to look at her, and what he saw in her eyes made his breath catch. Pure, unfiltered desire, mixed with trust and affection. It was a look that made him feel like he was the luckiest guy in the world. Last night had been intense, filled with a desperate need that left them both breathless and exhausted. But now, in the quiet morning light, Kyo wanted to take his time, to savor every moment with her. He leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss that was slow and deep, full of everything he felt for her. Tohru responded instantly, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair as she kissed him back, the warmth of her body pressing against his. As they kissed, Kyo let his hands roam over her body, exploring every curve, every inch of her soft skin. He could feel her heart racing against his, her body responding to his touch with little shivers and gasps that made his blood heat. Somehow, without even realizing it, he found himself looking down at her, their bodies aligned perfectly. He took a moment to look at her, to really see her. Her cheeks were flushed, her lips slightly swollen from their kisses, her hair spreading out like a halo on the pillow. She was breathtaking. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. It wasn't just a compliment, it was a declaration, a truth he felt with every fiber of his being. Tohru's eyes softened and she reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Kyo," she whispered, her voice filled with so much love that almost made him choke up. He leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead, then her nose, and finally her lips. But he didn't stop there. He kissed his way down her neck, across her collarbone, taking his time to appreciate every inch of her. He could hear her breathing growing more uneven, could feel the way her body responded to every touch. But he wanted more. He wanted to hear her say it, to tell him what she needed. Pulling back slightly, he looked into her eyes, his voice low and husky as he asked, "What do you want, princess?" Tohru's breath caught and she looked up at him with wide, dark eyes. She whispered his name, her voice trembling with need, but Kyo wasn't going to let her off that easily. He needed to hear it. "Tell me what you want," he murmured, his lips brushing against her ear as she spoke. She let out a shaky breath, her body arching slightly as she whispered, "You. I want you, Kyo." Kyo felt a rush of heat as her words, a primal satisfaction that made him smirk. "Good girl," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her lips before moving lower, letting his hands and mouth explore her body in a way that made her gasp and shudder beneath him. He took his time, savoring every sound she made, every touch, every look of pure desire that crossed her face. At one point, as the tension between them built, Tohru let out a soft, breathy moan, her voice filled with pleasure. Kyo quickly covered her mouth with his hand, his voice a teasing whisper as he said, "Careful, baby girl. I don't know who's home or if they're awake." Tohru nodded, biting her lip to stifle the sound she was making, her eyes wide and filled with a mixture of desire and embarrassment. Kyo couldn't help but grin, leaning down to press a kiss to her forehead. "Good girl," he murmured, his voice filled with affection as he continued to touch her, to bring her to the brink of pleasure. They moved together, a perfect harmony of passion and affection, until finally they were both left breathless, their bodies trembling from the intensity of it all. Kyo collapsed beside her, pulling her close as they both tried to catch their breath. "How was that?" he asked after a moment, his voice filled with a teasing warmth as he looked down at her, his hand brushing over her hair. Tohru blushed, a soft giggle escaping her lips as her reply. Kyo laughed, a deep, satisfied sound that rumbled in his chest. He leaned in, pressing a tender kiss to her temple as he whispered, "I love you, Tohru." Tohru smiled up at him, her eyes shining with happiness as she whispered back, "I love you too, Kyo." And in that quiet moment, wrapped in each other's arms, nothing else in the world mattered. It was just them, together, exactly where they were meant to be. Hi, my name is Angel and I hope you like this. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe. And if you want to hear more, check out my website, or if you want my books in an easier to read format, check out my Wattpad. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.